Twilio CEO Jeff Lawson has written the book on how business leaders can get the most out of their software development teams. But I was wondering, what can us software developers learn from the book? So I sat down with Jeff and asked him what his 3 tips would be for software developers that they could learn from the Ask Your Developer book. So let's throw it over to Jeff to get those tips.
Okay. So the first thing is, I believe that developers and business people like everyone needs to think about the fact that writing code is ultimately a creative endeavor. And that creativity can manifest in, oh, how do I solve this problem technically? How do I turn this, idea into code? And developers are incredibly creative when they do that. But the other thing I would say that both business folks and developers need to recognize is that creativity, that creative problem solving bit that pretty much every developer I've ever met has, can also be applied to business problems and to customer problems. And so for developers, and part of the book, I talk about how code is creative. And that's why you see so many developers turn into, say, entrepreneurs or really invest themselves in products and building great products, is because it's essentially a creative expression. And the more developers realize that too, I think the more empowered developers will feel. And you see this a lot. Like developers may go to work, and at work they say, okay, well, I'm going to write the business people hand me a spec, and I'm going to write software to the spec. And they go home and they've got side projects, and they contribute to open source, and they're building little hobby things, maybe starting a business on the side. It's like developers, you need to think about the fact that it is creative, and you should be able to apply that in your job. You should be able to apply that to the place where you spend your most time. And so part of that is like showing the business folks what you're capable of and recognizing, first of all, for yourself, don't let yourself get pigeonholed into I just write code. Actually advocate for developers at your company and your organization being partners in solving problems in the digital realm. So you should put yourself in a position where you can understand the customer problem you're solving, or you can understand the business that you're building, so that you can contribute to a wide variety of problems, which I think if you do that, if you really understand the business problems you're solving and the customer problems you're solving, I think you will be more satisfied in the work you do because you'll see purpose to it. You'll see the impact of the code you write. I think you'll also write better code because you'll have intuition around why you're writing this code as opposed to just writing something someone else told you to write. And I think you'll feel more satisfied. You'll get more job satisfaction out of it. And your career will be better because you'll have a much wider purview of problems of the business world and of directions you can take your career, whether you can contribute more and run or be involved in more impactful projects, whether you end up saying, I want to be a product manager, I want to be an engineering leader, or maybe I want to be a business executive one day. If you don't think of yourself as someone whose job it is to turn specs into code, but rather think of yourself as someone who solves big business problems with software, I think you'll have so many more avenues available to you and you'll be happier in what you do. The second tip that I have is put yourself close to customers. And the interesting thing, I think back to the early days of Twilio, when I would, any given day, I'd be writing code, designing a product, doing customer support, on the phone with a sales prospect, talking to investors. I'd be doing everything in one day. And in that world, I could really keep the whole business in my head. I really could intuit what customers want and why I'm building the thing in the first place. And when I was able to do that, I was able to move so much faster. I was able to correctly guess what I thought maybe customers were going to want next and next and next. So I could architect things well. And I had an intuition about how to solve problems that let me move quickly and confidently. And as companies get bigger, the tendency is to isolate developers from customers. All done with good intentions, by the way. You're going to hire a customer support team to handle the tickets. You're going to hire a sales team to go meet with the customers. You're going to hire product managers to kind of design the products. And all these things are well-intentioned and good, but you as the developer, you might end up getting really isolated from customers. And that's a problem. And so if you find yourself not having customer interactions, even periodically, or feeling I don't really even remember who the customers we're serving or why they want problems solved, I think you're not going to do your best work. And so it's up to you to advocate in some ways to actually have that proximity to customers. The amazing thing is What customer wouldn't want to meet some of the people who are building the products they rely on? Or what customer service or sales team wouldn't want some involvement by developers? What product manager doesn't want their developers to understand customers? Like everybody, in theory, wants their developers to have some proximity to customers. Therefore, I think it's up to you to speak up and sort of raise the voice. And my model for this actually is one of the people I talk about in the book, a product leader at Twilio. His name is Ben Stein. And he tells the story of his first job out of college as a developer working at Bloomberg. And, one day he went to the manager and he said, they were building software for the Bloomberg terminals, for traders. And he asked his manager, he said, so, when do we get to go like visit a customer and see how they use our software? And the manager kind of like laughed like, oh, well, that's an interesting idea. We've never done that, but, I'll keep that in mind. And, Ben sort of thought it was funny that no one on their team had ever actually met a customer before. And so he kind of orchestrated this. He found a friend who worked at a bank. He said, do you mind if I come by and check out check out your terminal and see the software? And, in his mind and in the mind of the team, the widget that they built for the Bloomberg terminal was like used as they had been developing it on the Bloomberg terminal, like a 35-inch screen or whatever. And it was all their beautiful widget. And he showed up at the bank at the trading floor and his friend showed him over to the screen. And actually the widget that Ben and his team worked on was this tiny little like 16 pixel by 16 pixel thing in the corner of the screen, because the screen is like full of all these different widgets. And like the thing Ben worked on, you couldn't even read it. The fonts didn't render at that scale. The graph was barely legible. Like none of it worked the way they thought it was. And he's like, whoa. And he went back to the team and said, you wouldn't believe it, but this beautiful thing we think we're building, our customers do not perceive it that way at all. And it completely changed their roadmap. They had to think about different ways of rendering fonts. They had to use, different aliasing techniques. They had to do the graphs differently. And that totally changed their perspective. And so I love that idea that here's a developer on a team that didn't really have customer interactions, but Ben as a developer, took it on himself to actually go meet with a customer. Now, not everybody's going to go do that, but like, are there ways that you can advocate on your team to have some customer interactions? Can you volunteer to be like, I want to ride shotgun in the support team and help them with some tickets, or I want to go on a sales call. I don't even have to talk. I just want to be there and hear the kinds of things our customers are asking for. And I think those are great ways to get yourself in front of customers, to understand customers better, and start to build more intuition for your customers as opposed to just hearing about the customers from your product manager or somebody else. All right, my third tip for developers is understand your business. Because a lot of developers, like myself included, and especially in the early days of Twilio, I'd be really focused on just having like the best product, and the product experience was everything to me. Or maybe architecture, like, oh, the code was really elegant and like that's the thing I woke up and cared about every day. But in reality, your business is a lot more than just having the best architecture or code or the best even product experience. History is littered with companies who had amazing products but who failed at business. And so in order to really understand the impact of the work that you do and ultimately to propel your career, the more you learn about not just the software or the product that you're building, but the business, how your company makes money, how you get financially rewarded by doing great work, that allows you to round yourself out. And I find that a lot of product people in particular don't really understand a lot about the company's go-to-market. How do you reach customers? How do customers find you? How do they pay you? How do they value? How do they put a dollar value on the work that you do? And what are the main drivers of the company's growth, of making money, of making profit ultimately? And I think more as the developers, you can understand the business impact of why you're building the software you are for the customer you are, the more you're able to actually use your superpower of building software in ways that benefit the company and that everyone in the company can understand. The finance people can value what you do if you can think that way. The sales or go-to-market people, they can value what you do if you can think about not just building a product, but also how customers end up adopting it. And that gives you many, again, career paths for how you can apply your software superpower the more you understand not just your product and how beautiful it is or how elegant the code is, but rather how those things ultimately turn into your company making money. And so the more a developer understands about the business side, I think the more opportunities there are for developers to play that partnership role.
Now, Jeff wasn't satisfied to just give us 3 tips. He actually had an additional bonus tip. How cool is that? Here it is.
Here's another one. that I think is really interesting. It's so many businesses, developers and the business side, everyone's been trained that basically the business's job is to understand customers, gather up requirements, document those requirements in like a PRD, and then throw it over the wall to the developers to turn that requirements document into code. And at a lot of businesses, it's almost as if everyone just believes that, the developers are this black box. And if you feed requirements and Mountain Dew in one end, you get code out the other. And everyone seems to be happy with that model. But to me, as a developer myself, I've never been satisfied with someone handing me a spec saying, write this code, right? That's kind of like code monkey work. I really want to understand, why am I writing this code? Who am I writing it for? And so what I advocate for businesses is that they share problems, not solutions, with their developers. So sharing problems is like, I'll give you the example. Sharing a solution is like, we need a form with a field that says name and it's 40 characters long. Sharing a problem is, we want to make our sign-up form on our website, we want to make a customer be able to sign up in 10 seconds, not 10 minutes. Because we could, drastically accelerate our business if we could do that. And once the business side has shared the problem with you, not just the solution, now you get to use your whole brain, developer. You get to think about many other ways in which you could solve that problem and take it much further potentially than a business person might be thinking about at the onset. And so how do you do that as a developer? Well, I think first of all, if you don't understand the customer problem or the business problem that you're solving, speak up, ask, put yourself in an environment where your product manager or other business leaders are sharing the problem, not just the solution they need you to implement. But the other thing I found is that Agile sometimes actually encourages developers to think of themselves in this pigeonholed role. Think about Kanban, the board with like all the tasks stuck up on the board, and you go pull off a random task, read it, implement it, put it back on the board. Like that's a factory assembly line model of software. And fundamentally, I just don't think that's the best way to build software or to think about your career or to do your best work. So I think the key thing is in some ways almost demand that the business side share problems with you so that you can be thought of as a partner in solving those problems. And you can use your full brain and all your knowledge about the technology and what's possible to bring new ideas and solutions to the table, as opposed to being content with having people share solutions with you and believing your job is just to implement them. I wrote this book for business folks. I think developers will find a lot of interesting things in the book, but in particular, if you find interesting cultural bits or practices that your company would benefit from, and by the way, every company can benefit, Twilio can benefit from doing a lot of these things better, share the book with your manager, with your product manager, with your engineering leader, with your business side, because again, everybody is aligned in wanting to build great digital products and experiences. And so share the book and do it in a friendly way. Like, hey, there's a lot of cool tips about how to build an innovation culture, a software developer friendly culture in this book. And I think great things will happen. And so I hope you enjoy the book. I hope you share it. And I hope the people you work with find value in it as well. And I can't wait to see what you build.